Greetings, mortals, and a capital day to all. I'm your host, Simon, and today I have with me a very special guest. Introduce yourself, brother.
Thank you very much. My name is J. Philip Jimenez, and I'm now coming to you from Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, where I've been for the last 8 years. And that's a whole story, which I should probably tell a bit about that story about myself, which might explain a lot about how I came to this topic. But I'll let you decide where we go from here.
No, you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. I would not say, definitely, I would not say that I'm an expert. And where I'll tell you the angle that I'm coming at the subject of the Black nobility. I was trained as an actor. I went to school at Santa Clara University, and then I performed professionally, and I studied at Harvard at their theater training program, and I went then to New York City, and I studied there with some professional training programs. And then we had 9/11, and 9/11 came and hit me very hard. My whole story, my whole 9/11 story is quite bizarre. I don't know if you want to get into that, but the long and the short of it is that I felt that acting was not going to do it for me anymore, and there was not much in terms of political theater or like a vibrant, relevant theater scene at the time, and I was feeling very disoriented. And my father is a law professor at Santa Clara University, and I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point. I was completely, as I said, the event of 9/11 had completely disoriented me. So I had been very focused before that. And so my father said, "Why don't you come with me to Tokyo for our summer program and maybe help me run the program?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And then he wanted me to do some writing and some research. And my godfather, it just so happened around that time, he was the president of Kungmin University, and he was stepping down. And my father said, some of his friends were putting together a festschrift of articles and things in his honor to commemorate his long tenure at Kungmin. And he said, "Would you write something?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Write whatever you want. I'm very busy." So I was writing about international law. I thought, I was very naive back in those days. This was back in 2012. And I thought, it strikes me that the international law is it's very aspirational, but it doesn't really exist. And even at that time, I could see that the ICC and the International Court of Justice and these organizations were basically political organizations working generally in the interests of the British, I could see, and the Americans. And so I thought, I'll write about that there's no international law in reality. So it was a very sort of bombastic, young effort to, bemoan this lack of international law and a lack of the rule of law generally in the world. And so it went into the Festschrift, and my godfather read it, and he thought, "Oh, he really liked it." So I said to my father, I said, "Maybe we should try to do what the article is about. Try to set up some kind of international law program somewhere that would be completely free of politics." And of course, that was completely unrealistic, and I couldn't think of where we could even begin such a program. The United States, of course, absolutely, we couldn't do it there. Other countries, China, Russia, were too controversial. Europe was completely under the thumb of the United States and the MI6, and Africa was too underdeveloped, and Japan was too much under the influence of the United States, and I couldn't think of it. And I just proposed that people needed to come together and put together a new international law center somewhere. And then soon after that, my father got an email from an old colleague. They used to do like poverty law in California, helping the migrant workers in California back in the 70s. And so his old colleague got in touch with him and said, "Hey, why don't you come visit me? I'm in Mongolia." And my father told me, he said, "Yeah, I heard from Jeff, he's in Mongolia." And I said, "Oh my God, Mongolia. Yeah, that's the perfect place because it is generally has no enemies. It's friends with everybody. The population is very well educated, multilingual, and not political. In fact, Mongolia is, I don't know if there's another country like this, is friends equally with Russia and the United States." Um, so he came here, and then he told me, "Oh, it's great." And so I said, "Yeah, okay, that's wonderful. It sounded really good." And then I came in the following spring. This was 2013, my first time. And as I came and we did some conferences, we brought some lawyers from Japan, we brought lawyers from Korea, from Seoul, Korea, and we did, international arbitration seminar. We did a big uh, free speech seminar or symposium. This was maybe, gosh, 5 years ago. We had the Mongolian Philharmonic play. We had the Mongolian Bar Association sponsor us, and it was a big deal. And yet I couldn't figure out why we weren't getting this thing off the ground, and we weren't getting support, because I naively thought, well, everybody wants international law, everybody wants justice, and who who would not want this? Why aren't people throwing money at us? And I came here. I had some pretty good contacts. I knew the minister of culture, and I had met the prime minister, and I thought everything was just going to go very quickly. And I got an invitation. It was a colleague of my father's who became my good friend. He's sort of like another very important figure in my life, and he was with UNESCO. This was just after that. He wrote the book on the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict for UNESCO, and his name was Dr. Jerzy Tolman, and he passed away a few years ago, ostensibly of COVID, but he had a lot of other health issues, and I was just absolutely, the last couple of years that he was on this planet, I was just feeling so bad. He said, "Oh, I don't think I can come to Mongolia." He had really been a huge inspiration for me to keep this idea going forward. But back in 2013, he said, "I want you to come to Vienna, and I want to introduce you to Karl von Habsburg. And I think he would be very interested in your project." And I said, "Wow, this is very exciting, Karl von Habsburg. Okay." So I went to Vienna. We had a great time. I met Karl. We had a little dinner together in this old inn where Beethoven had written, I think, his third symphony there. And he seemed to, "Oh, yes, it sounds like a very good idea." And so I got sort of his very casual sort of blessing. "Yeah, it sounds very good, wonderful." And so then I went back to Mongolia, and I was feeling like everything was going to go really well. And nothing. I never heard back from Karl. My friend Jerzy Toman, Dr. Toman was always very supportive of me, and I haven't given up. You know, I figured it took me 10 years to get this far. I'm probably going to go another 10 years at least. I'm not giving up on this.
Quitters
It's
never
clear to
win.
that's right. Exactly. And you know, the time frame, if you think about it, 20 years is really not much to do something on the scale that I would like. I would like to initiate something on a larger scale, and you know, 20 years is nothing really when you get down to it. And you're correct. Quitters never win. And every time I think, oh my God, you know, things keep happening. COVID happened, and one thing that happened was when I got here, Mongolia, the economy was doing really well. It was booming. It was something like 17% growth a year. And we thought, oh my God, this is the perfect time to go. It's booming and everybody loves me. And this project is such a great idea. And then everything came to a screeching halt. And I couldn't understand it at all. I said, you know, we have all of these resources. We have like trillions of dollars worth of natural resources in the ground. We've got a 97% literacy rate. All, you know, we've got Mongolians people are just absolutely amazing, most wonderful people. I just feel so lucky to be here. And I couldn't understand why we had like hit a wall. And then I started reading more and more, and I started about this thing called resource curse, which afflicts countries in Africa. If you have resources, you know, people are going to come in and make sure that you do not develop because they want access. They want easy access to your natural resources, and they don't want you particularly to develop to the point where you can take control of your own resources. And I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. You know, I had no idea about this. But one of the things I did that led me to this was I'd been through 9/11 in New York. I was living in New York at the time. And I had kind of sensed that something, my whole story is very bizarre. I don't know if you want to get, if you do at some point, just ask me. But I said, I came to Mongolia and I said, okay, I want to start this program in international law. It needs to be like a clean slate, start from scratch. I need to know basically how the world is run. What's the truth about it all? And I said to myself, I said, you know, I was in New York for 9/11. I know there are some people that don't believe the official story. And I know they're probably crazy, misguided people, but let me, just in the interest of fairness, because I'm supposed to be about international law and eternal principles, higher law, right? All right. Let me look. I said, I will look at the 5 best reasons they have to doubt the official version. And then I will, you know, spend the rest of the day refuting those and checking them off. And then I'll feel secure that the official version was the correct one. And well, I came across like 5 reasons that could not refute. I couldn't find any refutation, any counter argument. And I said, oh, geez, you know,
Building 7.
what do, huh?
Building 7.
Buildings, building 7, one major one. You know, I remember, the odd thing is, I remember watching TV the next day. Building 7 was very bizarre, but it's very interesting. When you are in the middle of a crisis like that, not when one, you know, some people kept their wits about them and could see some of the cracks in the narrative. But, you know, for the average person, you're kind of freaked out. You hope that the authorities are taking care of everything. And maybe if you have kind of a critical, if you have some pathways, neurological pathways of some critical thought, maybe some of the things you see don't quite add up.
Oh,
but
they
you
took
go
care of
along with it.
it.
Yeah, you know, I just I remember looking at the video, like I was trying to look at the size of the plane and the amount of fuel that would be on the plane, and then looking at this big steel building, and then looking at all, you know, it didn't quite add up, but I didn't say anything. I didn't say a damn thing to anybody. And so I had bought into it. So then when I was in Mongolia and I had then begun to question it, and then I could see why, you know, then things started to click in my mind. Then it became clear to me that the official story was ridiculous, in fact. And I read everything. I looked into everything, and I eventually found not a researcher. He was somebody who was directly involved in 9/11, a Russian guy, Dmitry Khalazov, and he wrote this amazing book called 9/11thology, which is a 1,200-page book where he goes into absolutely granular detail about the whole operation. He had been a nuclear explosives uh, specialist in KGB, and he had been involved. He had been involved with the main planner without knowing what he was into. The main planner had sort of been tailing him and then introduced himself and then asked him some questions. And on the basis of that, the operation was planned by a guy named Mike Harari, so who was Mossad, but a French citizen as well, and worked with the Bushes. So I was like, oh my God. And then I said, okay, let me get into some other hot topics. You know, that when that domino fell, and then it was a series of others. And I was saying, okay, I need to find out what is at the top. How does this structure? You know, the whole idea of the pyramid, of this sort of pristine global hierarchy, never quite sat with me, didn't sit well with me. And then at some point, just very recently, I stumbled into the black nobility. And I'm still very much wrestling. It's an enormous topic. It's absolutely huge. It's like somebody dropping, it's like you're walking down an alley and somebody drops this octopus on you and you don't know what the hell it is, and it's got 1,000 arms and you're trying to figure out what it's all about. There's the version that you see on YouTube, where it's all coming from Venice, which I thought it was, the black nobility in Venice, basically the same thing, but it's not. Venice is a very important aspect of it, but it involves pretty much all of the royal houses in Europe. People have said that it starts with the Este family, and then sort of becoming the Guelphs, and then the Hanoverians, and the House of Orange, and the House of Windsors, and Wittgenstein, and all of the others. So it's become, you have on the one hand you have houses from the Holy Roman Empire, the northern tier, or also southern German and northern tier houses that intermarried with the Venetians. You have the old Roman families, like the Colonna family that goes back to the time of Julius Caesar, and a couple of the others. They have their own organization. They consider themselves to be extremely special. And then you have the Venetian Black Nobility, which I think I would say they are at the heart of it in terms of the financial wizardry, the financial power, and the kind of epistemological methodology behind this whole enormous mass swirling, kind of always shifting and changing kind of grouping of nobility. So it's not as simple as to say, well, these are the top families of Venice, and that accounts for everything. And I could see then that and the House of Habsburg as well. Um,
Does it
I
have
could,
any does it have any connection to Babylon? I've often heard it referred to as the Babylonian Brotherhood.
yeah, that is something I've in my research. I came across the ancient Babylonian city of Tyre, or the Canaanite city of Tyre. And I don't know, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I know it has to do with money magic and usury, but I my expertise, to the extent that I have any at all, doesn't go back that far. What is your understanding of that?
I think it comes from Helen Blavatsky. She talks about the Babylonian Brotherhood. I don't know much more about it than that. It's just something I've heard.
I'm very dubious about Madame Blavatsky. I think she was a British agent, and I think they were fomenting a kind of irrationalism. I've done a lot of research into the figure of Le Comte de Saint Germain, and he was a very active, very pragmatic political figure who was obviously an aristocrat himself, who thought very highly of the aspirations um, of the American Revolution and freedom more generally, and development, and the real economy, making things, creating things, building real value, education, and his uh, the more mystical aspects of him were sort of co-opted in the late 1800s by people like Blavatsky and maybe Rudolf Steiner and some of these other people.
Would
But
the would the
go,
English House of Royals, would they be counted as the black nobility, or are they like lower on the pegging pole?
the house of the house, she's definitely descended from the house of Este. She's definitely a Guelph, and the house of Saxe-Coburg. They're all, intermarried from. You can go and see the Kaiser, for instance, the Kaiser in Germany, who was from the house of Hohenzollern, was basically the nephew of Edward VII, and Edward VII was able to go over to Germany and say, this Otto von Bismarck that you have, as long as he's your chancellor, no one's going to take you seriously as an emperor. Everyone thinks that he controls everything. And so he got his stupid nephew to fire Bismarck, and then it just went downhill from there. That's how Edward VII got his World War at that point. And they're related to the Romanovs as well. So you have this expansion and a continual intermarrying, which I found to be almost overwhelming. When you look at a house like the House of Savoy, that was responsible for bringing Mussolini to power, and who came into Rome in 1871, and declared that the Pope was no longer the imperial head of everything. And some people say that that's where this label of black nobility comes from, that the nobles who were loyal to the Pope closed themselves up in their houses and shut their windows and stayed in the dark until, well, the Lateran Treaty of 1929, where the Vatican was established as a sovereign entity at that point. But the House of Savoy, then they are connected with the Wittelsbachs, and they're like, you can see where all of these major powerful, the Habsburgs, you can see where they continually intermarry. And you take a house like the House of Borghese, very powerful. First of all, you need to understand that these major houses, House of Bourbon, that would be the House of Bourbon Two Sicilies, the House of Bourbon Parma, the House of Savoy, the House of Medici, Medici was originally a Florentine family. That's a wonderful story, what happened with Florence in the Renaissance, which was in effect, in an epistemological sense, and in the entire outlook, it was an attempt to offset the monetarism and the predatory uh, behavior of Venice. You had Florence, but now the Medicis are essentially one of the black nobility. They're very powerful in Hollywood, very dangerous people. You don't want to get on their bad
Bad
side,
side.
and so, and of course, the Queen of England, and you have this connection with the Queen and the House of Pallavicini. The Pallavicinis, I think, bankrolled England during the war against Spain, and you had the Pallavicinis also bankrolling Napoleon Bonaparte. And the
Oh,
Pallavicinis, incredibly powerful. They have a palace in Vienna, which I saw last time I was there last year. And you look at the size of these families, the reach that they have, the fact that they own all the mafias in the world are connected to one or several of these families who kind of converge. If you look at, say, for instance, MS-13, or the Mexican drug cartels are generally owned by the House of Bourbon or the House of Torlonia.
is it the same with Cosa Nostra?
Yes, yeah. The Sicilian mafia is owned through various families. Probably the center, I would say, at the core of the black nobility, probably the most powerful family would be, from what I've read, would be the Massimo family.
And nobody's ever heard of them.
Right. And if you look at who's at the top of the head of the household, no one's ever,
They don't do interviews.
He's very very, I mean, what can I say? I had I did a few podcasts with Ian Ferguson, White Lotus
Yeah.
of Light. And one day he texted me, he said, Philip, someone's asking in my comment section about the House of Massimo. He said, you know more about this, so would you please go on my site and answer the question? And I said, okay, sure. So I went on, and I kind of went on at length about Massimo, how they own, the Clerkenwell crime family in London, other things, and that they're one of the top owners of the Vatican, and the head of the family claims that he owns all of the corporations that are nations. So nations are corporations, and apparently he owns them all, like a deck of cards. And a lot of very connected with drugs, very connected with a lot of other things too. I don't, I don't actually pass judgment on these people, but I'll tell you why in a minute. So I wrote a little bit, and 30 seconds after I answered this person's question and I posted, it disappeared.
What?
Yeah,
That's
it just
weird.
vanished. And I thought, maybe the internet connection in this cafe is not very stable. I will go ahead and do it again. So I typed in again. I added a few extra things. I hit post, and less than 30 seconds later, it disappeared.
Well, let's hope this video stays up.
Yeah, I don't want to get you in trouble. So I'm not going to go into too much specifics on some of the darker things. the funny thing was I had posted some other comments. They stayed up just fine. It was just those. The thing is, these people have armies of gang stalkers and hackers who like are continually combing the internet for. That's why I'm not saying the name of the head of the household. Uh, I have a lot of admiration for the guy. I mean, really, if you look at it, uh, we're all in quite a bind. The reality is, as I see it, we live under feudalism, and we've never gotten out from under feudalism. It's has these disguises, democracy, communism, fascism, but the royal houses, the houses that they're no longer on thrones anymore. Some of them don't have territory, but they have incredible power, and the Holy Roman Empire still kind of exists. You have
Holy
the
Roman Church.
yeah, the Holy Roman Church. That's the Catholic Church, but the Holy Roman Empire. The one who was it who joked that it's neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Was that Voltaire? And it came to power really into the forefront. I mean, I would argue that it goes back to Clovis, but some people say that most people agree that it was Charlemagne when he was crowned by the Pope on Christmas Day in 800. That was the christening of the Holy Roman Empire. But you have it's based on something called Arian Christianity, and it was kind of a federation of these little duchies and sort of little kingdoms and fiefdoms, all kind of a patchwork, and a bit on the informal side. And you had the Habsburgs ruling for that was most of the period of the Holy Roman Empire for about 600 years. You had Habsburg rule, but you had other families in there. You had the Esterhazy, um, Auersperg, Fürstenberg, Fugger, the great banking house of Augsburg, Fugger. Well, the Fugger family were educated in Venice. All the young men in the Fugger family went to Venice to be educated on how they were to proceed. Hohenlohe, Orsini also, Sein Wittgenstein, Schwarzenegger, and a family called Thurn und Taxis, who came from they're really an interesting family, just as sort of a case study, being that they came from Bergamo, Italy, which was kind of a satellite of Venice, and they transplanted themselves into Germany. They were Torre Tasso, and they moved to Germany. They Deutschified it, right, into Thurn und Taxis, and they took over the postal service, which was kind of a cover for their taking the leading role in the Venetian intelligence service, which was what may be. I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you for sure. I'm sure elements of it still exist, but certainly up until very recently, I would say until the 80s or 90s, you could have argued that the Venetian intelligence service was premier in the world, the most important, the most powerful, the most deadly. And the House of Thurn and Taxis were, some people say that they were behind the Habsburgs, that they kind of propped up the Habsburgs, that they were the real power. But one of the secrets that they had for maintaining their power was that they never sought political power. They liked to stay in the back a little bit. And in this way, they kept this continuity going for this family with this incredible power and wealth for 800 years. So you had in the 80s, it's a really interesting interview with Prince Johannes. He's since passed away, but Prince Johannes in 1982, Thurn and Taxis, he said he was the richest man in the world. And back in those days, he was declared he's worth 5 billion, which back in the early 80s, that might have just done it, in terms of establishing you on that level. He was probably worth a lot more than that, but that's what he declared. He owned Regensburg and something like 5 castles, 15 castles. And he declared he was always in and out of the White House. That's the funniest thing. That's the strangest thing. That's the most frightening thing. As you look at the United States now, someone like Johannes Taxis back in the early 80s, he might have been, according to this one interviewer, I read a couple of his interviews with great interest, and I took a lot of notes, like a lot of notes on the series of interviews. He said, at the end he was shaken, because he said he thought back in 1982 that Count Johannes, Prince Johannes, Count Johannes, that he might have been the most important single individual in Washington at that time. I have a friend in Austria who knows a lot of these families, and I asked him about the Thurn and Taxis last time I was there, and he said, "Oh, they've lost a lot of their fortune. They're not really important anymore. The houses that you really want to look at are like the House of Liechtenstein, very important in banking, right?"
Have you heard of
So
Wallenberg?
in Sweden,
Yeah.
yes, of course. I think it's true, perhaps, that the first central bank, the first large central bank, was in Sweden. Isn't that true?
It might be. It might be. I know the Wallenberg pretty much own Sweden. They're
Right.
always on like dinners with politicians and so on and so forth. They're very important, and they're connected to the Rothschilds as well. Just
But
strong link there.
probably they're more important than the Rothschilds. The
Probably.
thing with the Rothschilds is that, you go back to the time of Rome, the royal families have long had adopted this tactic where they push the Jews to the front, so the public sees the court factors, the court Jews, and everybody points to them. Oh, when things go wrong, look, But in reality, if you want to look at where the power really is, you look at the House of Torlonia, you look at the House of Wallenberg, even this kind of fiction that the Windsors are subservient to the Rothschilds, and everybody on the internet, they post that picture of, was it Evelyn de Rothschild's poking Prince Charles's chest. And he's a bit taller, but it's supposed to indicate, oh, this is proof. I don't buy that for a second. I think the Windsors have a lot more money and a lot more power, and the Rothschilds are bankers. They're employed by them. The Rothschilds were initially promoted and hired, if you will, by the House of Hesse, and then the House of Habsburg. So they're essentially bankers. They're employed by these houses. They're employed by the Windsors. People want to believe that these people are at the top of the world, this hierarchy. But what I've seen is, firstly, that's absolutely untrue. Secondly, that it is not a neat and clear organization at all. It is completely messy. Most of these people are completely insane. They have superiority complexes. They have God complexes. They have more money. Some of them measure their wealth in the trillions. And they literally control all the banks. They control everything. They control all the mafias. They control the black markets, the drug empire. You also have people who say, well, it's the House of Windsor. They're on the top. They're, for instance, I don't have a problem talking about them. I'm not afraid of them. I should be, but I'm not, But, people say that they're on the top in terms of human trafficking in the world. But I would say Princess Diana actually talked to a confidant. She never wrote about it or spoke about it publicly, But several times, regularly, she and the Queen would go to Venice, and they would meet with Elvira Pallavicini, who was the matriarch of the Pallavicinis, and they would go there and pay tribute and have a tete-a-tete, and at these meetings, the Queen said, absolutely, you're never to tell anybody about these meetings. So all we know is that they happened. It makes sense, though, given the history of the Pallavicinis, incredibly powerful. They have tremendous authority even over the Islamic world. One member is one of the key, most powerful people in Islam. You can look at the religions worldwide. That's another area where the black nobility controls all the religions. And I would say it started from a place of cynicism. The relationship with the Pope, for instance. Oh my God, this is such a huge such a huge subject. Now, if you go to Rome, we have this Jesuit Pope. The Jesuits are not really Christian. They're not really Catholic. The Jesuit order was set up by the Venetians, by Venetian. He was a cardinal actually, but he was one of the top oligarchs, Gasparo Contarini. This was after the Venetians were so horrible. They had basically had this financial war with Europe. First of all, they didn't consider themselves to be part of Europe. They didn't consider themselves to be part of Rome. They were part of the Byzantine Empire, and then they were even declared. They even had sovereignty in that context. So they had bankrupted almost all of Europe by 1500. Finally, in 1509, France, Spain, the Pope, most of the Italian city-states, the Holy Roman Empire, they had all had enough of Venice. And they signed this document, we formed the League of Cambrai. We are going to take out Venice once and for all. This is something we need to do for the sake of humanity. These people are monsters, and let's go do it. And Venice came within an inch of completely being wiped out. And at the last minute, they made a deal with the Pope. They said, oh, we'll give you back some of your papal states. And this Venetian patriarch by the name of Chigi, the Chigi family, to even today, very, very powerful. He came forward with some money, and they were able to pay for some mercenaries and fight their way out of a very tight situation. But in the battle of where they lost to France, they lost. It was interesting because Machiavelli, he was deeply opposed to oligarchy in general. He was a great crusader for freedom and for human dignity and for an educated, empowered citizenry. He's not at all how people characterize him. He was not, when he wrote The Prince, he was not advocating, though, this is how you should behave. He was not of that. He was just warning people, this is how the game is played. You better be aware of how it's played. And I'm going to, make sure that you're hip to how things are done. And you're foolish if you don't understand reality. But he was ecstatic when the Venetians were defeated at the Battle of Agnadello. But they managed to worm their way out of that situation and stay afloat. But atop the Doge, I think he was the Doge, Antonio Contarini, he said, Agnadello was punishment because of our lasciviousness, our selfishness, our greed, our excesses, our immorality. we nearly were destroyed. We need to reevaluate our tactics in the world. And one of the things they did, which is characteristic of the Venetian method that the British are still continued to exploit, that the British inherited because of the infiltration of the Venetian party around the time of the Henry VIII. The British, I'll tell you how this goes, but they thought, we're really nervous about getting invaded by these Germanic tribes. Germany could come down and wipe us out at any time. We're very vulnerable. So Gasparo Contarini, he heard through his, what's his name, Lucianus Rufus in Germany, and he had an accomplice, what was his name, Spalatin, and they had heard about, they found this guy, Martin Luther, and he was a very rough, very powerful, charismatic character, but very a diamond in the rough, And he had this idea that it was through faith alone, not through works, that you're saved. And Gasparo Contarini had a similar kind of awakening that it's not what you do in this world, it's just by faith, your connection. This is the only thing that saves you from damnation. So he started to think. He was able to sort of promote and fund and promote the work of Luther through publishing houses in Venice. And they published something like 40,000 editions of Luther's works. And then they distributed them. And this kicked off this intense religious conflict in Northern Europe. So it was engineered by the Venetians, and it was coming at a time of war where the Venetians were on the verge of being exterminated, basically, and use a very classic divide and conquer strategy. And at that point, the Venetian oligarchy kind of split. You had the nuovi, the new houses, and the vecchi, the old ones. The old houses tended to be more oriented toward the Pope, and the old, much older houses with a more direct connection with the Vatican. And the nuovi, they were pushing to say, hey, look, Christopher Columbus has gone to the New World. There's all this gold coming in. The world is no longer just in the Mediterranean. We cannot control the world from this little, swamp in north of the Adriatic. We have to diversify. We have to relocate. We have to adapt. So they began moving more. I would say to Geneva was, I think, in my own opinion, is that Geneva is the head of the snake. Geneva is the most important city. Geneva is what governs the world. But as I understand it, Venice is the heart and the brain. The office of this whole operation is in Geneva. But then you had, they moved also a great deal of it's based on the Fondi. Venice, I'm not a scholar, so I'm kind of all over the place in discussing this. I hope it's somewhat clear. Venice had acquired.
Track of.
Yeah, okay. I'll slow down, but I apologize to people. I don't pretend to be a scholar or an expert. I am somebody who's working with this information on a very specific project.
Have you ever read the 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati? I think it's a book.
No, I haven't read it, but I've heard of it, and I've seen that the chart that shows the 13
Is that
families.
pretty accurate? I know the Medicis are.
I don't think so. I know that there are families that are extremely powerful that are not listed there. And it's interesting, a lot of people leave out the Massimo family. or they leave out the House of Savoy, they leave out the House of Bourbon, Two Sicilies. The House of Bourbon, Two Sicilies, practically Prince Carlo, he's running, you know, Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau. I mean, this guy is. You can see pictures of Trump meeting him, and it's very obvious he's a very powerful, very charismatic guy with, you know, the people that we see in the West, the politicians, the people that are held up as leaders and powerful people. These people are nothing. You know, they're the hired help. They have no seniority. They have nothing. They're easily replaceable. Even people we talk about, Bill Gates or Elon Musk, what these people have is just is chump change compared to what some of these big houses, the House of Braganza, the House of Aldobrandini, the House of Torlonia, they are overseeing the Bank for International Settlements. You know, um, you have the House of Farnese that advanced the Jesuits. I was going to mention how the Jesuits were formed, and I was explaining how they were not really Christian, how they were a military religious order who were created by the Venetians and then embedded in the Vatican to serve the interests of the Venetian nobility.
Oh, that's super interesting. I didn't know that. I know the Jesuits have a strained relationship with the Templars.
Tell me about that.
I just because the Catholic Church burned the or Grandmaster Jacob Le Frey or whatever his name was.
Right, right.
So the Templars have had a strained connection with the Catholic Church since then, and especially the
Yeah,
Jesuits.
I was thinking about that. I think maybe it was competing for power. I
Probably.
know very little about the Templars. Um, maybe this overlaps with the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, the SMOM.
It does for sure.
Okay.
They're strongly connected, the Templars and the Kings of Malta, but they're competing factions as well.
Yeah, this is what people don't understand. There's a lot of backstabbing and constant things are in constant flux. Things are very messy. You have all these egomaniacs and people who are killing each other 1 minute, go forward a few decades and they're working together like the Genoese and the Venetians. They were at each other's throats. There was warfare, but in the end, they settled into a solid, stable kind of relationship where the Genoese were sort of junior partners of the Venetians. And sort of you had the Genoa, Venice, Geneva grouping that came to dominate and work as one thing. But I understand that the SMOM, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, is more powerful than the Vatican, and it actually has probably the highest level of military authority on the planet, but also financial authority as well. And if you look at members of the Knights of Malta, embedded in the U.S. military, embedded not just the U.S. military, all militaries, it reaches a point where you just think, why even try? Because it's hopeless. They've got this whole thing sewn up, and they have so much money and power. And what's the point? And at that
So
point, yeah,
so
go ahead.
when how about secret societies? We have like the Skull and Bones, and especially the Illuminati. Do you think they're still around, the Illuminati,
Um,
or
I
stay at
think
that like a psychological operation? Yeah, that name.
I think the Illuminati are an offshoot of the Jesuits. They might come from this Spanish group called the Alumbrados, the Illuminated Ones. They definitely exist. You know, they are there's historical fact. Some people, I think people are led to believe that they control the world. You know, the all-seeing eye is above everything. That's absolutely untrue. I will say that Skull and Bones is being overseen by, well, the House of Windsor has a big role in Skull and Bones. Yale was set up by the British House of Russell, I think. There's some connection with Tavistock as well. Do you know about the Tavistock Institute?
It sounds familiar, but not particularly.
The Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, it's outside London. They got their start early in the 20th century. It was important that this big new war that Edward VII, although he passed away in 1911, that was his whole aim was, you know, Germany was up and coming in the world. Bismarck had broken from the British. He had decided to sign up with the American. Back in those days, there was something called the American system of economics, and it had to do with development and production and building steel mills and railroads. And Bismarck had said, you know, this free trade nonsense with the British, what are we getting out of it? You know, sorry. And he signed up with the Americans, and Lincoln's economic advisor, I can't think of his name right now, but he had gone over there and consulted with the Germans, and they began building extensive railway systems and really becoming a powerhouse. And Britain couldn't compete. They didn't have the will, they didn't have the knowledge. So the only option was to, you know, like when you're playing chess with somebody and they are losing, so they knock over the board. That was essentially the idea. Edward VII set up a situation where, you know, everything went up in flames, and all of the progress, all of the incredible development that was happening throughout, not only in Germany but Russia as well. You know, the United States exported their know-how and their technicians to Russia as well. They were building railroads there as well, and steel. There was a steel industry in Japan also. So you have a sense of Britain, which is essentially Venetian. That's kind of a link that maybe we won't have time to get into today. But the infiltration of Great Britain by the Venetian party, which we're seeing evidence of this today. If we look at what's happening in Palestine, look at the development of Israel, we see this epistemological, very sneaky kind of the manipulation of religions, the manipulation of secret societies. If you were come right down to it, Zionism is a spin-off of British Freemasonry, going back to the 19th century. So yeah, in answer to your question, Skull and Bones, very much, you know, George Bush was a knight of the British Empire. CIA was basically set up by MI6, and that means they're taking orders from the Royal Institute of International Affairs and ultimately from the Privy Council. Unfortunately, little by little, I would say that the assassination of John F. Kennedy was sort of the end for the United States. And at that point, the United States is doing nothing but doing the imperial will of the British. You look at all the wars we've gotten into, look at everything we've done. There's nothing vaguely American about it. We've been hoodwinked, we've been fooled, you know? So let's see, where was I?
What do you think? What do you think about the idea that the the U.S. is the military branch of the Illuminati, and the London is the financial center, and the Vatican is the religious center? I've heard something like that before.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I would say that, Yeah, definitely. The United States is the military wing of the British Empire. The United States is not in control. It does not take the lead. This whole notion that the British, oh, they had their empire, but now they're just second fiddle playing along to the tune that the Americans play. This is total nonsense. They're still very much in control of our foreign policy and our domestic policy as well. But I would say that Geneva is more powerful than either London or Washington. Most of these major operations come from uh, the oligarchs in Geneva. The heart, as I said, the heart is still in Venice. The methodology, the will to conquer the world, and that essentially extremely sort of like the Jesuits. There's no morality. You can kill, you can rape, you can kidnap people, you can steal, but if you're doing it in the interests of your superior to fulfill an order, then it's a virtue. You know, this very, very much close to what I think a lot of people would identify as being Satanism.
The
Um,
from what I understand, the elites worship Saturn, the god Saturn, which
uh-huh.
is which is actually just Satan. Uh, there's a link there between, and also Seth from Egyptian mythology, a god of chaos and the foreigners and the desert. So from what I understand, they worship Saturn. And do you want to know an idea I have about
Yeah.
why the bloodlines are so important? In Egyptian mythology, we have the story of Osiris, who was killed by his brother Seth, and then he is resurrected again through the help of Thoth. He's resurrected, and he and Osiris and the resurrected Osiris and Isis have a child who is Horus, and
Hmm.
Osiris can't stay in the living realm permanently, so he goes back to the underworld. But then he is reborn in his son Horus. I think the elites have figured out how to how to choose their next vessel for their incarnation. So that's why the bloodlines are so important, because they're reborn in their children.
That's really interesting. I mean, I know something about that. Some people maintain that the pharaonic bloodlines, that the important families of Europe come from Egypt, that there is a pharaonic bloodline. But I also know, since I've been in Mongolia, you know, the idea of reincarnation, that, you know, some people think of it as a belief. But since I've been here, I've talked to so many young kids who remember their past lives, where I hear, you know, adults tell me, oh, my son, you know, every year we have what's called Sagansar, and the whole family gets together. It's kind of like uh, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's all in one. You know, it's a 3 day, usually goes on for 5 days. And you know, at the last, was no, this was about 5 years ago. Little boy, my nephew, he said, I was an old woman and I had a cow. And if I had my cow again, I would be happy. And then I was like, wow, this is really heavy. Another kid around the same time, he was telling his parents that he fell on a hiking trip and died. He dropped his cell phone and tried to retrieve it and had fallen and died. And his parents knew that this had happened in a something called Amax. They're like states far away. They had read about this event. But I also had a young person, a teenager, I was telling her, I said, have you heard about these kinds of stories? She said, oh, yeah. She said, I'm my own great grandmother. And I said, wow, how does that work? And she said she had gone to visit her grandmother, and her grandmother showed her some belongings that her mother had, and said, look, these are my mother's things, her hairbrush, her mirror, her nice things. And this young person said, oh yeah, and she started talking and describing the items and explaining where she got them. And she said, those are mine. And her grandmother said, well, the only explanation is that this is my mother. And I've talked to a lot of people. They say that this is fairly common in Mongolia. People come back in their families again and again. So I don't rule out something like that. That's a really interesting. I've never heard that in relation to the nobility of Europe.
Yes, the usually Christians don't believe in reincarnation, but the Rosicrucians have a tradition of believing in reincarnation, and I'm a Rosicrucian myself, believer in
Ah,
the Prisca Theologia.
I lived in when I was a teenager. Lived in San Jose, California, and there's a Rosicrucian museum. Do you know of it?
No, I said I know there's a temple. I don't know if there's a museum as well. That's also
Maybe it's a temple and a museum. I remember there were some buildings that we weren't allowed to go to, but it had, the whole Egyptian style structures and images and statues, and it was fairly close to Santa Clara University, which is a Jesuit college, and it was in an area of town called the Rose Garden area. So I
awesome.
was kind of exposed to that. But I definitely believe in reincarnation. I have no idea how it works, but I've just heard too many stories. I can't discount all of them. It's very very interesting. This whole as I get older, this the relationship between the so-called this world and the next, or the spiritual world and this world, becomes just more and more enticing and more kind of baffling and fascinating. I find myself just kind of dwelling on it. And part of it is, investigating, looking into the black nobility, these people who are willing to do anything to hold on to this power, this money, and to expand it and to consolidate it and to hand it down. I'm thinking, God, it just doesn't mean that much to me. I know there's another world, and I can't imagine, hatching a plan to kill billions of people just so that I and my little circle of 139 families can hold on to wealth and hold on and increase our power. It just doesn't mean that much to me. And then I suppose also talking to Ian and then connecting with you, with these traditions that are actually trying to penetrate these mysteries and trying to understand this relationship and the deeper underlying uh, what would you call it, the mystical tradition. I don't really know. I mean, I'm really
Mystery
ignorant
schools.
about. Yes, I don't know much about these things, but I'm becoming more interested. I used to be like, oh, come on, but since Ian, I definitely, when you talk to him, you definitely, okay, there's something here. I don't know what it is, but I'm not going to discount it anymore. I'm going to see what I can learn about it, because it does figure very highly when you go back to, the Venetian families come from a tradition that's really pre-Christian. It goes back to the Delphic Apollo, the Delphic origins, and the myth, the cult of Apollo, and then it goes back to these older traditions, these Gnostic traditions. And I was going to ask you if you can just maybe elaborate a little on what Gnosticism means to you, or what.
Uh, well, Gnosticism is the search for gnosis or knowledge, direct experience with the divine, pretty much.
Hmm.
And it's a very individualistic philosophy. It doesn't really believe in a lot of dogmas and so on and so forth. Gnostics are pretty much open-minded. We have several different branches of Gnosticism, like the Valentinians and the Sethians and so on and so forth. And the Sethians, I think, and some other schools, they believe that the universe is a prison for your soul, like you're trapped in matter, by an evil god, or they call him Suckless, the fool, like a malevolent god that's created all of this. But the Valentinians have a different view. It's more like the Platonic view. They believe that the demiurge is good, but that materialistic life is a bit flawed. He was a flawed being, pretty much. And then you have the what I follow, which uses the word gnosis a lot as well, and that is Hermeticism. And Hermetics believe that the universe is a beautiful creation made in the image of God.
Ah,
So a bit
they
about
they
let's
seem
go. They go ahead.
they seem like different levels of awareness or vibrational. They might correspond to vibrational states. You know, like definitely some days I feel like, God, this is a prison. I feel trapped. Why, I need to transcend this. This is insanity. I never signed up for this, And then other times I have these moments where I feel like, yeah, this is all a wonderful creation of the highest, and I'm just one with it. There's nothing other than consciousness in this kind of miracle of creative awareness that gives rise to everything. And you get these wonderful kind of euphoric, harmonious feelings of oneness with it. So these kinds of levels of Gnosticism might correlate to your level of awakening, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think from I think I read it somewhere that in the mystery schools, like the Templars are very Gnostic as well. That there are different levels. You start out with believing the demiurge is evil and flawed, and then once you go higher up, you start getting into the realm of Hermeticism and so on and so forth. That's what that was pretty much my journey as well,
Ah,
from Gnostic to Hermetic.
okay. How long how long did this take you, and was this a conscious process, or?
Um, it took me about maybe a couple years, 3 4 years, something like that. I'm not sure what like a conscious project what that means.
I'd say maybe like an eternal like groping or working towards something, even if you don't know exactly what it is.
I studied a lot.
I see. Through the
Yeah.
path of study, that's probably a very reliable, without too much torment, right?
And
If
under
you if
plenty
you
of
have,
torment still.
oh really? Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, me too. Oh my God.
Nothing is
Yes,
free
I.
here. No such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah, damn. I really hate that. And even those moments of awakening, you're like, wow, how did that happen? You know, why couldn't I have had that 15 years ago,
Yeah.
And it's so difficult to put these things into words. Um, but I think it's kind of a natural segue going from this feeling of, oh my God, what can we do against powers that, associated with the black nobility? Uh, you could look at it as a spiritual struggle between, the Guelphs versus the Ghibellines. The Ghibellines are represented by the Hohenstaufen, tradition of Charlemagne. These were city builders. These are people who wanted to build up communities and empower people. And then the Guelphs, who were pro-pope, but not from a religious sense of being pro-papal, but just that they had a taste of the amount of prestige and power that was associated with being bankers to the Pope, and with monetarism and speculation and bullion speculation and seizing trade routes and all these things, the ability to make money from money. This sort of amoral, city-centered, very cynical worldview versus the other side, which maybe you could say was epitomized by Florence, where that we are created in the image of God, imago Dei, and we have something called creative reason, and we can exercise that, and we can penetrate the secrets of the universe, and we can solve problems creatively. Whereas, Venice and the Guelphs were very much wanted to stamp out any awareness of that because it was seen as a great threat. Some people have. Go ahead.
Do you know that it doesn't say we were created in God's image? It says we were created in the image of the Elohim. It is plural. Judaism, or the Israelites used to be polytheistic, and that was written out of the Bible. But we still have some clues left, like Elohim being plural. If you read the passages, it says created in our image, in our likeness. Yeah.
Wow. Nobody says that. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I've covered it a lot on my channel.
Okay, I'm going to have to listen more. I'm sorry, like the last few weeks have been, we bought this apartment, this new apartment. We were supposed to move in back in January, and because of the economic brick wall that we all hit, everything came to a standstill directly as a result of COVID. And I'm still in this, it's like a little one-room apartment. I carved out a little time where I could be alone in relative peace and talk to you, but there's been so much going on. We've been involved in I kind of, I'm more tangentially involved. I'm kind of hidden because I'm a foreigner, but I can't name any names or be very specific, but it's involves a journalist in Inner Mongolia, which is China, and he was writing about the experience of the Inner Mongolians in China, and had some problems with the authorities, even here in the country of Mongolia, and I can't say any more about this, but it's been kind of a wild ride. And we've been doing, we've been staying fairly active, working not in any official capacity, but staying relevant, staying busy, and making contacts and working toward building up, this the idea of an international law center. So, but having to be very careful about taking steps, and taking a few timid steps, and then wondering, why are we not getting anywhere? And then the more I learn, the more I understand what we're up against. And I think what we can do is very much on the lines of what we were just discussing about Hermeticism. These are avenues that are not closed to us. We may feel overwhelmed by, and I told my wife about this, as we're working together on this, and she's like, oh my God, it seems like it's hopeless. We just seem completely overpowered. We should just try to forget all of this and just try to live normal lives. I said, well, we still have those inner, we still have the inner journey. We still have access to tremendous amounts of power just through being alive. And I think what you said about Hermeticism uh, sort of, to me, illuminates the very real possibility that all of us have. I continue to believe that if you had enough people who are awakening to a certain point, we can influence the whole system. And like I said at the beginning, I don't necessarily judge these people. Oh, these are evil people. They're the worst. They're devils. They're psychos. They're they're born into this just like we're born into it. I dare anyone to be born into a system that's been um, conditioning the human psyche down to a physiological level for thousands of years, and that somehow you're not going to be, a creature of those traditions. Some of these darker traditions, for instance. So it could very well be that some of these families will be the key to a liberation. And if we to the extent that we wake up, I think that that might trigger certain state changes of states in our immediate environment. I This is one thing that's been really baffling me. I think, God, there must be some families, some of these people who still hold out or still hold value within them the nation building tradition of the Hohenstaufens, of Charlemagne, who still believe that we have this incredible spark that can create absolutely anything we can imagine, that we would associate with the works of Nicholas of Cusa or Dante Alighieri, with the Italian Renaissance. That we still, that's wide open. Who are the people out there? They have to be out there. I just don't know who they are yet. And that's one of the things. I'm going back to Vienna in April, I think, and then I'll look around. I'll talk to people. I'll see, is there anyone who's on this wavelength, who understands that killing mass numbers of people and denying that kind of that infinite potential of human beings is probably not a good thing. That if we all try to uh, cultivate or husband that infinite potential of in humanity, everybody would be better off. You could live in a person who enjoys the prerogatives of a tyrant because they feel they secure certain benefits to themselves. They might see that they could live in even a much better place if everyone were able to exercise their creative reason, and we took the lid off, we took the shackles off. I mean, my God, we still have slavery. Slavery is worse than ever these days.
Yeah, there are more slaves alive now than ever in history.
Yeah, and it's like, just when you think things can't get worse, they do. And what's it going to take?
I'm
But
curious. What is there a connection between the Federal Reserve and the black nobility? Seems like something they would do.
oh yeah, I can't remember right now, but the Federal Reserve has some ties directly with what? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it. Something I just learned recently. It might be the House of Farnese. I know the House of Farnese, they had a pentagonal fortress that Pentagon is based on. The Federal Reserve is also based on one of the palaces of one of these Italian families. So they're behind all of it. The Federal Reserve, the Treasury. maybe the treasury is based on the Villa Torloni, I think. So right.
Awesome. So this has been a great time. I think it's about time we wrap it up. I don't want to take any more of your time. You said you were working on some project with international law. Is there anything like you can give a shout out, like anything that people can help with if they want to, donations, etc.
Um, yeah, any goodwill. I mean, what I'm really trying to do, I realized that we can't accept help from established organizations or from academia or any kind of government institution or any NGO anywhere, because then you're opening the door to infiltration and the kind of subterfuge of your basic. If you have a pure intention, people are going to come in through those portals and pull you one way or another, and next thing you know, you don't even recognize what it is you are trying to do. So if I'm open to anybody who has ideas on how you develop, I tried to do crowdfunding a few years ago, but people were like, "Wait, you have these connections to Kunmin University, Santa Clara, this and that. You know the Habsburgs. You can't get any money from them. Maybe you're kind of not on the level, right?" I'm like, I know I can't. You know, we are. One, I think the big tragedy is that law has been taken hostage by politics and, as they say, weaponized. And so if anybody knows of a way that we can begin to build, I'd like to build an institute, a place of study with a library. I'd like to have symposia and eventually maybe some tribunals and a place. What I'd love to do is have a place where people can come from all over the world and discuss anything, absolutely anything, openly and freely, as long as they preserve the spirit of goodwill and good faith arguments, logical arguments, honor and respect of other people, and have and work toward real solutions based on logic and reason and our creative faculties. And I still believe that Mongolia is the place to do it, just because of its location, because of the tremendous, amazing spirit of the people. And when people come here, they feel like they're coming to someplace very special, and they clear away all of the baggage, you know, and get down to business. And that people like to, our friends from Korea and Japan like to go to the countryside and experience that Mongolian life, the nomadic lifestyle, and they feel that they're connecting to something that it's new to them and awakens something in them. People here are very globally conscious, and not in that kind of brainwashed way of the West, but the young people here, it's amazing. They're aware of everything that's going on all over the planet. So I think, yeah. So given that that's the project that I want, I'd like to have a place where people can come and talk about anything, uh, no holds barred, except respect and the very highest principles, and in a spirit of inquiry and the transcendental principles of law, on the very highest level, and begin to address. I think all of the issues could be solved eventually, but we first need a place where we can do that. We have some good places we could begin to set things up. We have good contacts. We're just waiting on the funds, and it's been very difficult to get things going, but I'm not complaining. I expect this, and I'm not giving up. I'm just getting going, actually. I look back at the last 10 years, it's like, okay, that 10 years kind of flew by. What can I do so the next 10 years do not fly by like that? I'm going to get more done, figure out what's really going on, how to focus myself better, um, tactically, get rid of more of my naivete.
So do you have an email address people can contact you at, for example?
Yes, it is. Maybe I can text it to you. It's Jimenez, Jimenez dot Mongol Justice, MONGOLJUSTICE at gmail.com. And I also have a YouTube channel, J. Philip
Oh yeah,
Jimenez.
there we go.
Yep. I have a terrible. My YouTube channel is terrible, but I just keep it up there because I know I'm going to make it a good one someday. It's going to be like yours, like professional. Like your channel is so nice,
Oh,
and I'm
thank
looking
you.
forward to poking around in it more and opening myself up to some of these topics that I'm really deficient in. So
Could you say the name of your YouTube channel again? I interrupted you.
it's just my name, J. Philip Jimenez, J. period Philip with one L, Jimenez, Jimenez,
I'll put
and
both. I'll put both in the description.
okay,
All right, this
all
has
right.
been a great conversation. I have to have you on sometime again.
Yeah, that would be great. I was hoping for that because I really feel that I'm very scattered. I don't have the discipline of the scholar, and I'd like to pull something together. I just needed to get a sense of what you were interested in, how things would go. But it would be great to have another discussion.
Yes. Bye.
All right, take care. Bye bye. Thank you.